You think you know fear. You felt the jolt of terror from a horror movie, maybe even an uneasy chill down your spine on a dark night. But true fear is stepping into the shadows of a familiar forest and coming face to face with something twisted, broken, and disturbingly human, something that shouldn't exist. I thought I was prepared for anything the mountains could throw at me. Until one summer, I found myself alone on the Appalachian Trail, caught in a nightmare so terrifying it still haunts my every step. I always thought of myself as a pretty normal guy. Hiking, camping, fishing. That's my thing, with hiking being my favorite of the three. But now, those pastimes, the things I once loved, might just be forever out of reach, all because of what happened a few summers ago, alone on the Appalachian Trail. Growing up in East Tennessee, I'd been hiking these mountains my entire life. They're not like any other range. There's a raw, ancient energy here, a beauty unlike anywhere else. But something else, too, something sinister hiding in the trees. Despite their mysterious aura, the mountains always felt like home to me. One summer, though, I set my sights higher. I decided I wanted to hike the entire Appalachian Trail, all 2,000 miles of it, from Georgia to Maine. My friends, they thought I was crazy. They couldn't understand why anyone would want to walk through forests for weeks, maybe even months, just to reach the other side. But the idea held me, gripped me tight. I was determined to see it through. Alone. I'd come prepared with every piece of modern gear you could think of, and I was confident I'd stay in touch with family and friends via my cell phone. In early May, I set out, passing through trail towns, picking up supplies, and reconnecting with civilization here and there. By the first week of July, I was back in familiar territory, deep in the Tennessee mountains. And that's when things started to go wrong. There are countless dead zones for cell phones out here, especially in the mountains. I knew that and wasn't bothered by it. I posted a quick video update, letting everyone know I'd be off the grid for a while, and continued onward with nothing but my compass and the confidence that I knew these woods like the back of my hand. But something strange happened that night. My compass, something I'd trusted without question, just stopped working. The needle spun aimlessly, never settling, like it was caught in a magnetic field pulling it in every direction. It would hold steady for a second, only to spin again wildly. My grandmother had always told me strange things about these mountains, about places where compasses would stop working and time seemed to slip away. I never paid it much mind, but there I was, watching my compass betray me. In the dimming light, I tried to get my bearings, but the trail became unrecognizable. It was like the forest had shifted around me, twisting paths I knew so well into something foreign and eerie. Panic hadn't set in yet, but a creeping unease began to rise. I told myself I was fine. After all, this was my own backyard. But by the time the sun had set, I'd wandered far from the main trail and had no idea where I was. I stumbled into a small clearing, flat and open, perfect for setting up camp. Exhausted, I built a fire and ate what little I had, grateful for the chance to rest. I just opened a can of peaches when I heard footsteps. At first, I thought it might be a deer or some other animal, but these steps were heavy, uneven, human. I froze, my heart hammering as I strained to see past the firelight. Shadows flickered, and then a figure emerged, stumbling out of the darkness. He looked like he'd been dragged through the mountains themselves. ragged clothes hanging off him, caked in dirt, his face gaunt and hollow, eyes rolling as if they couldn't focus on anything. "Food, shelter, help me," he muttered, barely able to stand. I kept my distance, my hand hovering over my knife. "Hey man, you alright?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He didn't answer. His eyes flickered to me, then the fire, then my backpack. "Please, it's her fault," he murmured, louder this time, his voice hoarse and broken. I offered him some food and water, cautiously, and he devoured it like a starved animal. As he ate, he mumbled fragments of sentences, never quite making sense, his hands trembling and eyes darting around. I asked him for his name, but he just muttered incoherently, his gaze drifting as if he was trapped somewhere far beyond this clearing. Suddenly, without warning, he started to scream, a sound that ripped through the night air, filling me with a deep, primal fear. I backed away, knife in hand. As he lunged at me, he tackled me to the ground, his hands clawing at my face, his filthy nails raking across my skin. I struggled, fighting him off, and finally managed to throw him off me. I bolted into the trees, leaving everything behind. My backpack, my tent, my food, everything. The forest closed in around me as I ran blindly, stumbling over roots and rocks, desperate to get away from whatever nightmare this was. My mind raced. Who was this man? And what did he mean by, "It's her fault"? His screams echoed through the trees, growing fainter as I ran deeper into the forest. I don't know how far I ran before I stopped, gasping for breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I found a small rocky outcrop, a narrow space just big enough to crawl into, and I huddled there, hoping would be enough to keep me safe until morning. But sleep was impossible. Every sound, every rustle, set my nerves on edge, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, hunting me. Past, and finally dawn began to break, casting a faint light through the trees. I crawled out of my hiding place, exhausted and sore, but alive. I stumbled through the forest, hoping to find some sign of the trail or a road, anything that would lead me back to safety. And that's when I heard it, a long, blood-curdling scream echoing through the trees. I froze, my blood turning to ice. It was him. He was still out there, somewhere, and he was getting closer. I pushed myself to keep moving, adrenaline fueling my steps as I stumbled onto an old logging road. Relief flooded me, but it was short-lived. As I rounded a bend, I saw a group of forest rangers, their faces grim as they surveyed the map on their truck. I ran toward them, breathless, and they looked up, startled. I quickly spilled out the story of my night. The madman in the woods, his crazed mutterings and violent attacks. One of the rangers placed a hand on my shoulder, calming me. "You're lucky to be alive," he said, his expression dark. It turned out they were there to search for a man who had escaped from a nearby mental institution over a week ago. The ranger's face grew grim as he told me that the man had been terrorizing hikers, driven by the belief that he was haunted by his mother's spirit, a woman he claimed was a mountain witch. She'd supposedly cursed him, tormenting him until he brought her a new body to possess. A chill ran down my spine. The man's frantic cries hit in my mind. "It's her fault." I realized, with a sickening dread, that he had been trying to bring his mother back, and I had nearly been his sacrifice. As the rangers loaded me into their truck, the forest echoed with another scream, distant but unmistakable. The madman was still out there, roaming the mountains, a specter of terror for anyone who dared to cross his path.